Minnesota, there are a lot of laws around election transparency, and as November 5th gets closer, some of those laws are taking center stage. Today, Valley News team's Quinn Gorham saw how counties across the state securely test their voting machines ahead of our elections.
Here in Blaine today, they're doing what's called a public accuracy test. It's something that happens in every single precinct across the state ahead of the general election to ensure that things are working accurately and properly before ballots are cast. Minnesota Secretary of State Steve Simon was present for the Blaine test on Thursday, explaining in detail why the tests are important. Required by state law, the PATs evaluate each machine with a number of different tests, everything from submitting blank ballots to improperly marked ballots to normal ballots. They submit ballots from a pre-marked stack to check the consistency. At the end, the results are compared to what was in the stack, and the numbers ideally should match. Simon says there's a high degree of scrutiny used in these tests.
Only if the equipment performs perfectly is it allowed for use in the upcoming election in Minnesota. So what you'll see here today are a lot of people doing very exacting work, and they will not finish until all of the equipment has met the standard and performs with perfect accuracy.
Before and after the tests, counties are required to keep voting machines under lock and key, and at no point are the machines connected to the internet. Public accuracy tests are, as the name suggests, public, so anybody who wants to attend one is more than welcome to. Check with your local precinct to find out when your district is holding a public accuracy test. Reporting in Blaine, I'm Quinn Gorham.
Officials released the latest absentee ballot information this morning. According to the Secretary of State's office, more than 715,000 ballots have been transmitted for the state so far.